Imagine a new kind of investing, a potentially life-changing way to invest that honors biblical principles, the kind of principles that you and I grew up with. Since 1994, Timothy Plan has made biblically responsible investing possible, offering mutual funds and ETFs that are filtered for biblical principles. Don't compromise your values. Invest with Timothy Plan. Ask your financial advisor or call Timothy Plan at 1-800-TIM-PLAN. Again, that's 1-800-846-7526 and discover what it means to be a biblically responsible investor. Investing involves risk, including possible loss of principal. Before investing, carefully consider a fund's investment objective, risks, charges, and expenses contained in the prospectus available at timothyplan.com. Read carefully before investing. Mutual funds distributed by Timothy Partners Ltd. and ETFs distributed by Foreside Fund Services LLC. As a paid testimonial, there is no guarantee of future performance and each experience will differ. Hey there, welcome to another MemoPod. It's great to see all of you now this week. Last week, some of you may have been wondering what in the world happened. Here's what happened. You're free subscribers. And when you're a free subscriber and things get hectic in my schedule and I'm whisked away to Florida to do a conference and I don't have time because it's late at night to get everything done and recorded and I only get a portion of it done, that's going to the paid subscribers. So, I appreciate all of you, love all of you dearly, but if you wondered why didn't I get a MemoPod last week, that is in fact why. But it is great to have all of you with us here this week for the MemoPod. In the second half, we will stick around for those of you who are paid subscribers. You get an additional section of the MemoPod today. Would love to have all of you as paid subscribers, but I understand how economics works, and I understand that you have to be very frugal with your dollars, and if you don't see this as a benefit, edification for your Christian walk, I get it. I totally understand. Okay, so let's start off here, because there's a lot of folks talking. We're going to start off in the world of politics. A lot of folks talking right now about former President Trump appearing at the National Association, is it Association of Black Journalists? That he went there. Now, to my knowledge, Ms. Harris, who is the presumptive Democratic nominee, she did not go there. Okay? So I think there's something to be said, and you know I'm not a huge Donald Trump guy, but there's something to be said for somebody who's willing to step into the arena where he knows he's going to get arrows thrown at him and be willing to talk and be himself and answer questions. I think that's how you win people over. So at least as far as that goes, kudos to Donald Trump. Now, Rachel Scott is a reporter on ABC. And I'm going to say this, Rachel Scott, I believe, 99% of my being believes that she is a hardened leftist. Okay? Granted, that's a pretty safe bet whenever you're talking about mainstream journalists. However, I do not think, there's a lot of people flipping out about her aggressive and unfair and catty line of questioning to Donald Trump. Maybe the best thing to do is to just roll the whole clip. Okay, this is the way that she started off going at former President Trump, the way he responded, and this is what it has a lot of people worked into a lather. Let's go ahead and roll the clip.
It's not true. You have told 4 congresswomen of color who were American citizens to go back to where they came from. You have used words like animal and rabbit to describe black district attorneys. You've attacked black journalists, calling them a loser, saying the questions that they ask are, quote, stupid and racist. You've had dinner with a white supremacist at your Mar-a-Lago resort. So my question, sir, now that you are asking black supporters to vote for you, why should black voters trust you after you have used language like that?
Well, first of all, I don't think I've ever been asked a question in such a horrible manner. First question. You don't even say, hello, how are you? Are you with ABC? Because I think they're a fake news network, a terrible network. And I think it's disgraceful that I came here in good spirit. I love the black population of this country. I've done so much for the black population of this country, including employment, including opportunity zones with Senator Tim Scott of South Carolina, which is one of the greatest programs ever for black workers and black entrepreneurs. done so much. And, and I say this, historically black colleges and universities were out of money. They were stone cold broke. And I saved them, and I gave them long-term financing, and nobody else was doing it. I think it's a very rude introduction. I don't know exactly why you would do something like that. And let me go a step further. I was invited here, and I was told my opponent, whether it was Biden or Kamala, I was told my opponent was going to be here. It turned out my opponent isn't here. You invited me under false pretense. And then you said you can't do it with Zoom. Well, where's Zoom? She's going to do it with Zoom, and she's not coming. And then you were half an hour late. Just so we understand, I have too much respect for you to be late. They couldn't get their equipment working, or something was
President,
wrong.
I would love
I think
if you
it's
can
a
answer
very
the question
nasty
on your rhetoric
question.
and why you
I have
believe that
answered
black
the
voters
question.
should trust you with another
I
4
have
years.
been the best president for the black population since Abraham Lincoln. That's my answer.
Better than President Johnson, who signed the Voting Rights Act?
And for you to start off a question and answer period, especially when you're 35 minutes late because you couldn't get your equipment to work, in such a hostile manner, I think it's a disgrace.
All right, now those of you who are watching the Memo Pod, you may have noticed the same thing that I noticed, and that is restraint on the part of Donald Trump. Again, I'm not suggesting that I think he's a new guy after the assassination attempt. I was hoping that, in fact, he would be. I'm not so sure that he is, but I'm not making the suggestion that he's a new guy and he's more restrained and he's more about uniting and all of that stuff. Whatever. But I will say that I would have expected him to cut her off, and you saw his face. He just kind of nodded and put his head down, and you could tell he was waiting. But you also knew, with it being Donald Trump, he was coming up with, you're not going to insult Donald Trump like that and not get insulted right back. And that right there, by the way, I think exemplifies why there are so many people who were drawn to him. And I'm going to say something else. I think it exemplifies why there are so many older people who are drawn to Donald Trump. A couple things about that. And some people say, well, are you saying you get more crotchety and grumpy the older you get? Maybe. No, that's not what I'm saying. Here's what I am saying. A lot of the folks who are now part of MAGA world, the Trump grandmas and grandpas and all of that, what you're dealing with there, for the most part, are a lot of conservative-minded folks. Maybe they've been involved in politics in the past, maybe only on the periphery, but they're familiar with the political world. And what they've been familiar with for 50 years of their life is spineless Republicans. And here's the way the system worked. The Democrats used the virtue, if you want to use that term, of Republicans against them. They played by a certain set of rules. The media let them play by a certain set of rules. Anytime a Republican started to play by those rules, they were called out by the media, and so the Republican backed down. The Republicans played nice while the Democrats played dirty. Whether or not you believe that's the case, that right there is what I would say 95%, and I'm making up that statistic, but it's right. 95% of the folks who are Trump or MAGA grandma and grandpas, the ones that go to the rallies with the white hair or the blue hair, be careful, because blue hair sometimes means that they've spray painted it blue, and those are the ones typically at the other parties' rallies. But so you have these elderly folks that go to the Trump rallies, and they're wearing their Jesus is my savior and Trump is my president shirts and all of that. And you wonder, why would someone with such staunch conservative Christian beliefs associate with somebody like Donald Trump, who is not exactly the living embodiment of Jesus of Nazareth? I think what you saw in that clip and what I said, you knew Donald Trump, if he was insulted, was going to clap back. And he's good at insulting back. He goes after Rachel Scott for being very tacky in her questioning, being a poor journalist. He attacks ABC News as a fake news organization, which, by the way, I think there's justification for all of that. But you have never seen a Republican, you never saw George W. Bush do that. You never saw John McCain do that. You never saw Mitt Romney do that. You never saw George H.W. Bush do that. That's not what they did. That's not what the Republican Party had their virtue used against them by Democrats who were always the ones on offense. And so what you have is a sense of relief and a sense of appreciation that finally, and I'm speaking now as a MAGA grandma or grandpa, finally the Republicans have a fighter. Finally, they have somebody who's going to put those people on the other side back in their place. And listen, you don't have to be a MAGA grandma or grandpa. You just had to be an adult during the Obama years with conservative views. And you saw right there how demonizing Barack Obama was. You saw in that presidency the birth of this rancorous politics that we're now engaged in. A lot of people love to point fingers at Donald Trump. Donald Trump is the effect. He wasn't the cause. The cause was largely the Obama years and the constant race baiting and the constant. Obama was never wrong. Obama could never be wrong. He could only be wronged. Okay? If something went haywire in his administration, it's because somebody let Barack Obama down. Barack Obama himself could never make a mistake. That's the way that side was. He was the Obama Messiah. And so you have leftists now who look at Trump and it's a cult over there. Okay, to the degree that it is a cult in response to the cultish behavior that the left has been engaged in for a long period of time. It's reactive. And so here you have Donald Trump at this event. He has no fear about going in there. He understands exactly what's coming to him. And then he claps back and he fires back. And so here's what you've got. And this is why I wanted to bring this up. Trump is being praised by his supporters for fighting off an activist. This wasn't a journalist, this was an activist, and you could tell from the moment she started asking the question, the hostility, the anger, the vitriol, the talking points of the left. Okay? You knew from the very beginning she was an activist, and Donald Trump didn't back down. He fought back against her. He insulted her and her employer, and that's why he's getting praised. I mean, you're seeing people post that Trump owned that interview. He killed that interview. Now, meanwhile, you have Rachel Scott, the interviewer, who's being praised by Kamala Harris supporters and Democrats for sticking it to Don. And they're posting things like, Donald Trump left this, he was booked for an hour and he left after 34 minutes. That shows you how well it went. And then the Trump people answer back and say, no, it's exactly what he said. Donald Trump sat there waiting to go on for half an hour because they couldn't get their silly audio to work right. And so because they ate up a half an hour, he had to get to a rally, and so he only had 34 minutes to give him. That right there, that's what's taking place right now. The Trump supporters praising Donald for sticking it to the activist. The Harris supporters are praising the reporter, Rachel Scott, for being on their team. Okay. Can I tell you what my take is? And I don't find like this great sense of joy or satisfaction in having a different take or a different spin. I've worried about that some in my preaching because in some of the recent messages that I've given where we've been talking about stuff that Jesus said and Jesus did, I've noticed things in there. The Holy Spirit's revealed things in those sections of text that I'd never seen before. And so I kind of worry that people at church are going to think that he just always has to try to come up with a new angle. That's not what I'm trying to do there, and it's not what I'm trying to do here. I'm just going to tell you that I watched that interview, and I say, I guess I ask, am I the only one that thinks this is exactly how it's supposed to be? That this is exactly how I want it to be. The relationship between media and governing officials. That's how I want it to be. Direct questions, straight to the point. You don't have to candy coat anything. You don't have to sugarcoat it. No, I don't want media people to play nice with politicians and would-be rulers. No, I want them to vet. I want them to pick apart. I want them to go. I want them to go on the offensive and probing, penetrating questions. I want journalists to dig and to work hard, to parse words, to push for clarification, to call out bad statements of politicians. Yes, I want what Rachel Scott did to Donald Trump. I want that to be the norm. I think journalists, media, should be working for us, for the people. I'm not saying I want to make it a public venture and all PBS and NPR. No, I'm saying I want the media to work on behalf of the people and therefore have a natural hostility towards those who take our money and make our rules. I want journalists to be skeptical. Cynical, maybe a bit too far, but skeptical. I want them to be skeptical of the people in charge. Not trust it. Not trust what they say. Not trust what the talking points are. Not trust the little memos that are sent out to all of them with the fact statements that they're supposed to all write their stories from. No. I want them to second guess everything that is being said and done by the people who take my money and make rules that I have to follow. So I don't have a problem with what Rachel Scott did, but here's the issue. Here's the reason that it cannot be celebrated universally. The reason is because it's not applied universally. You and I both know that Kamala Harris would have gotten completely different treatment. In fact, Kamala Harris is getting completely different treatment. The same news organization that is dispatching Rachel Scott to do that to Donald Trump is also huffing and puffing and pandering to the Harris movement and the Harris surge and all of this stuff, attempting to rewrite the history of who Kamala Harris is. So, right, Harris getting completely different treatment, that's the issue there. By the way, I need to say this about Rachel Scott. Rachel Scott just got yelled at not long ago by someone that you will recognize by the name of Nancy Pelosi. Yeah, she was, Rachel Scott was asking questions, was it a couple weeks ago? About if Biden was going to stay on the ticket and whether he should stay on the ticket and all of that. And she caught up with Nancy Pelosi in one of the tunnels there going to, I know that conjures up some imagery there. It's not like an actual tunnel, but it's like an airport tunnel under the ground or something that you're going to, I guess all tunnels are under the ground, but that you're going to the terminal and you walk underneath all the baggage claim and all of that stuff. It's kind of one of those tunnels that you get from the House to the Senate and the Senate to the House and all of that stuff. And Rachel Scott catches up with her and starts asking these questions, and Nancy Pelosi like snaps at her. Says, "Am I speaking English to you?" Again, you're a Republican, you can't say things like that. But I did watch that because I want to be able to say, no, that's who Rachel Scott is. You know, she's really good about this. Her body language in confronting Nancy Pelosi, totally different than her body language as she sat there and questioned Donald Trump. So again, that's my take on all of that. I want journalists to be like that with politicians. I don't need them to play nice. I don't need them to be kind. I need them to do a job and to do it well. I'm one guy, but for me, it's not the difficult questions or even the accusatorial statements. No, that's not the issue for me. I'm good with that. I would love to see journalism become that. No, my problem is the imbalance. It's always the imbalance. It's a very real thing. Okay. So if you're wondering, I don't know if you are or not, what journalists could start picking apart Kamala Harris for, Let me give you a couple pieces of advice. Let me give you a couple examples of things that could be covered. How about when Kamala Harris championed the taxpayer financing of transgender surgeries for prison inmates? Roll this.
When I was Attorney General, I learned that the California Department of Corrections, which was a client of mine, I didn't get to choose my clients.
Right, a client of the Attorney General.
A client of the Attorney General,
Right.
of the Office of Attorney General, that they were standing in the way of surgery.
For prisoners.
For prisoners. And there was a specific case. And when I learned about the case, I worked behind the scenes to not only make sure that that transgender woman got the services she was deserving. So it wasn't only about that case. I made sure that they changed the policy in the state of California so that every transgender inmate in the prison system would have access to the medical care that they desired and need. And I believe it was not only, I know it was historic in California, but I believe actually it may have been one of the first, if not the first in the country, where I pushed for that policy in a Department of Corrections.
Okay, so there you go, Rachel Scott. There you go, ABC News. Dig into that. Go after that. The Donald Trump campaign recently released an ad. And you want to say, well, but the media can't use the ads of the candidates as news stories or as fodder for interviews. Really? Because I'm pretty sure that's what the networks did with the Obama calling Kamala Harris to endorse her and to throw their support behind her. Pretty sure that's what the networks did. Ran that ad that Harris's team put together of that phone call and ran it as news. It's cheap. It's cheap. It's trash. It's an imbalance. The very same thing. But listen, this is a Trump ad. Listen, because this, or watch, this is Kamala Harris in her own words. This is what she believes.
You're considered the most liberal United States senator.
We're not going to treat people who are undocumented across the border as criminals.
Abolish ICE.
Yeah.
Is that a position that you agree with?
We need to probably think about starting from scratch.
Say it loud. Say it clear. Everyone is welcome here.
Raise your hand if you think it should be a civil offense rather than a crime to cross a border.
Raise your hand if your government plan would provide coverage for undocumented immigrants.
You support giving universal health care, Medicare for all to people who are in this country illegally?
I am opposed to any policy that would deny in our country any human being from access to public health, period.
You support the Medicare for all bill. I believe it will totally eliminate private insurance. For people out there who like their insurance, they don't get to keep it.
Let's eliminate all of that.
Boston Marathon bomber, on death row, people who are convicted of sexual assault, they should be able to vote?
I think we should have that conversation. As President of the United States, I am prepared to pass a Green New Deal.
Would you ban offshore drilling?
Yes.
What is the solution for voters who have jobs and interests in the fossil fuel industry?
Transition into the jobs of the future.
But would you support changing the dietary guidelines? Reduce red meat specifically?
Yes, I would. We have to have a buyback program, and I support a mandatory buyback program.
So there you go. That's where you can start, Rachel Scott. That's where you can start, ABC, CBS, NBC, all of them. There are plenty of things there. I have no problem with the litany of stuff that Rachel Scott said to Donald Trump. And I would have had no problem with her coming back and calling him out for embellishing and being silly with some of the things that he's saying in response to it all. That this wasn't all you, that you didn't do all of this for Black Americans. Which again, it seems very pandering to me. It really does. What have you done for Black Americans? As if Black Americans can't do for themselves. It just, again, very condescending to me. But that's where we are. The issue isn't the tough questions. The issue is the imbalance. Right there, you just saw Kamala Harris, or heard Kamala Harris saying and advocating for some really, really bad stuff. And journalists need to be in pursuit, hot on the heels. Be anxiously anticipating that interview from Rachel Scott very soon. Right? Your thoughts welcome. Peter at peterheck.com. That is Peter at peterheck.com. If you are a free subscriber, I gotta leave you here. Paid subscribers, you're going to come back with me after this short break, and in the second half, a guy that I wrote in for President of the United States just an election or two ago has made a very public statement. You'll know who this is for the most part. I would think you would. Has made a very public statement that again demonstrates to me I'm glad that even if I was the only American, that's the guy that I said I want him to be our president. I'll tell you who it is and what this sad letter was about when we come back in the second half. Paid subscribers, I'll see you then. Free subscribers, adios.
The Memo with Peter Heck.
Please patronize and thank all the sponsors of the Heck podcast, including McGonagall's Buick GMC, Terrell's Auto Service, Norris Insurance, Stevens Machine, Creative Financial Center, Indiana Right to Life, Tri-Green Tractor, the Indiana Family Institute, Hartman Family Farms, Liberty Financial Group, the Wyman Group, and J. Watson Creations.